coordinator. I've been working with the city. I've been working for the city of Durham for 22 years in various roles, and I'm also a member of the Durham City Workers Union chapter of UE Local 150. Shout out to our sponsoring organizations and the Durham City Workers Union chapter, UE Local 150, and North Carolina Raise Up Fight for 15 and a union. Thank you for all the candidates for joining us tonight. And we are honored to be joined by Elaine O'Neill, mayor candidate, City Council Ward 1 candidates, Deidreana Freeman and Marian Johnson, City Council Ward 3 candidates, AJ Williams and Leonardo Williams. Can you mute your, if you're not speaking, can you mute your microphones, please? As we continue to enter into this very challenging period for working people in Durham, the United States, across the country and the world, we are gathered here tonight to discuss Durham's future. In August of 2021, there were over 4.5 million people that quit their jobs, a record number in history. This could be a clear indication that workers are fed up with their working conditions, with their low wages, with safety hazards, and increased stress levels while working during a global pandemic. We see large signs on the side of the road thanking essential workers for carrying the city through this pandemic. But when we look at our paycheck, our living conditions, our mental health, and stress levels, we do not see that same appreciation.
Yeah, that thing she's doing 6
As
o'clock.
workers, workers, we know that the building unions and broad networks of working class people build power. Dante, can you mute? Someone has their, I'm hearing some feedback. Okay, what's happening? Hold on a second. Okay, sorry about that, you guys. As workers, we know that building unions and broad networks of working class people to build people in our power in our workplaces over the economy and linking up with a worker-led social movement is the only way we can make real changes in our community. However, every few years, we're asked to cast our votes. Tonight, we want to make sure that when we cast our ballots for the upcoming local Durham City Council and mayor elections, we are in fact informed. We will be voting only for those candidates who will vow to fight for our lives, to support us in expanding our rights to organize, in earning family supporting wages, and coming home safe after a hard work day. Early voting runs October 14th to October 30th. Election day is Tuesday, November 2nd. We need everyone here to make sure not to only vote, but to also bring 2 of your coworkers with you to the polls. Make a plan on how to include them and make sure to tell them what you learned here tonight. With that being said, we'll open up this forum by hearing from 2 essential workers, first from the Durham City Worker, and the second, a North Carolina Raise Up Fight for 15 worker. After we hear from those 2 workers, we will ask some questions of the candidates. First, I'd like to introduce Daryl Brunson, a solid waste heavy equipment operator and steward for Durham City Workers Union chapter of local UE150. Daryl Brunson.
Good evening, everyone. As Keisha so eloquently introduced me and gave a little brief description, as a union member, you're able to hear on the ground what the actual workers' concerns are. Because a lot of times, majority of the times, they are afraid of approaching a politician, someone that's in control of their day-to-day lives from the decisions that politicians make. And a lot of times they feel like the politicians don't actually care. They see it in the outcomes of the grievances that they file. They see it in the other disciplinary actions they encounter. They notice it in promotions where they get overlooked because of favoritism. And they see it in the annual outcome of the budget where they're not able to get a decent raise on an annual basis. But yet, as we see here today, in today's society, that you see the inflation is steady rising. I just read something earlier today where the inflation in Canada is now at 4.4% rate or 4.6, one and two. But what are we gonna do? Are we gonna work together and have that bridge that gap between the politicians and the actual workers? That's why we need people on the ground that's close to the workers, that hear their concerns. Because as politicians, y'all can't be everywhere. It's impossible. And being able to have this open dialogue on a regular, consistent basis, it don't have to be every week or every month, but every couple of months or every quarter, we need to have a discussion to be able to meet openly, honestly, and get the views and opinions of everybody so we can come together as one to make everybody's life a lot better and a lot more equality.
Woman like Quinn gets too short the guys like.
Because one thing we don't want is Durham to become a Washington, where you have total gridlock, where everybody, ran on a campaign of promising or saying this or saying that, but then yet nothing has gotten done in Washington for the actual people of the United States. And that affects everybody. It doesn't matter your background, your religion, your beliefs, or whatever. You was voted in because of what the people believe of what you said you was gonna do. It shouldn't take 4, 7, 8, 9 months to start getting things done, to start having that discussion and working together. And one final note, I would suggest that any candidate that's running for office, schedule a meeting with the current people that's already in office and see what their main goals are and stuff. So you can hit the ground running and not having arguments or sound bites in the public that discourages the people that actually voted for you.
Thanks, Daryl, for your comments. Now we'll hear from Jamila Allen, who's an essential worker at Freddie's and also a member of North Carolina Raise Up, Fight for 15 and a union. Jamila?
Hi, my name is Jamila Allen, and as you know, I work at Freddie's, which is a fast food restaurant, and part of NC Raise Up 15 Union. And we're working in Durham. As from my personal experience, we've had multiple COVID cases since COVID started. We went on strike 3 times, and that's all because, poor conditions in the restaurant. They don't like to clean. Because the last time, all the managers did was pour 2 bottles of bleach on the floor, told us to mop and clean, and then they opened a couple of hours later. That's just not right. That's just unhealthy and unsafe for anybody. And so, having unsafe working conditions is just my store. It's been almost every fast food restaurant and essential workers go through it. And 2 years ago, we did a hearing that was working in Durham, where most of the city council at the time came to listen to us testify on our personal experience. I personally testified about poverty wages. My sister testified about wage theft. Other people testified about harassment, rent high, and they listened, but they did nothing. The only reason why I'm bringing this up now is because you need to listen. You need our opinion. You need to do better than what they did last time. All they did was listen to us, thanked us for being there, and went home. That's just not right. We need our voices heard. We need to have say in our own jobs and in our own lives. So really, I just want y'all to know what are you going to do for essential workers being out here risking our own lives? How are you going to help, and how are you going to be better than those people 2 years ago that did not listen to us at all?
Thank you, Jamila, for your insight and your comments. We're now going to transition to the portion of tonight's meeting where we'll hear directly from the candidates. We have prepared 4 questions. We will ask each candidate to keep their responses to 90 seconds or less for each question. I will be running a timer to kind of keep us on track. We have a lot to get through tonight. If you're in the audience and would like to ask the candidates a questions, please put your questions in the chat. Our chat monitor, Dante Strobino, our international representative for UE Local 150, will collect those questions to be asked at the end of the night if the time permits. Now for our first questions of the candidates. And I'll call on you in a specific order to answer the questions. For Elaine O'Neill, as an elected city council member or mayor, what role do you see city workers and other essential workers, such as fast food workers and care workers in the city, playing to help accomplish your goals and overall mission for Durham? As an elected official and city council member or mayor, what role do you see the city workers and other essential workers, fast food and care workers in the city playing to help you accomplish your goals and overall mission for Durham? Elaine O'Neill, you have 90 seconds.
Well, good evening. Thank you all for having me here tonight and having me be a part of this this forum, especially with you all. I count it all joy that I'm able to talk, and I appreciate the comments so far from Ms. Allen and Mr. Brunson. I see you all as being essential and critical to changes that have to be made in the city of Durham, moving us in a way that is conducive for all city residents, especially you all who are leading the charge and have led the charge over the last 2 years. You have what has helped to keep this country going. You know, without you all, it'll be a whole different scenario. So your voices have to be centered, and I am thinking about ways to do that. And I'd like to share briefly with what I'm considering what I call mayor councils. And this is for Elaine if she's elected as mayor. I am looking to have a subject matter expertise in different arenas for people who will agree to take this ride with me for 2 years, who will act as advisors, consultants, collaborators, and actually helping to lead the charge on what we're going to do. You cannot fix what you cannot measure. So the first thing I'm going to need is ideas on how we measure where we are and where we need to go. What are we missing? I don't know your world, so I need your help in teaching me about your world as city workers, essential workers, so that I can better able to formulate it in my mind and be able to try to get the city council. As you know, we'll need 4 votes and we hope to have 7 to move forward with your suggestions. So basically very centering your voices in a manner that allows for us to not meet just every once in a while. My councils will be meeting with me regularly, and we will develop the plans as we go along. So wherever your subject matter expertise is, I hope you'll volunteer. I'm looking for about 2,000 volunteers across the city. And I am hoping that the city workers will be the voice when it comes to the subject matter expertise and of essential workers and city workers.
Thank you, Ms. O'Neill. Now we'll have Deidreana Freeman with the same question.
Thank you all. I'm Deidreana Freeman, Durham City Council member in Ward 1, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening and to share with you all in this time and conversation around how city workers and essential workers around the city are important. And I can't say enough. I think over the last 4 years, and even prior to being on council, I've relied on the voice of folks like yourselves in the unions to be a guidepost and a supportive resource, so to speak, and just making sure that you understand, like as Mr. Brunson mentioned, you can't be everywhere and you can't know everything. And so I really heavily lean on the experience and support, or the information and support that city workers and workers across the city offer, and just making sure that I know what's happening and how it's happening. I think I would continue to do that. I would continue to do that if I were selected to move forward. And then in a re-election, in this re-election for 4 more years. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Freeman. Now we'll have Marian Johnson. Same question.
Good evening, y'all. Happy Striketober. Thank you so much for having me at this event. I'm very excited to be here just as a former union member and union chair, NOLSW/UAW Local 2320. To answer your question, I believe that city workers and essential workers are part of my goals for city council, partly because I believe my #1 priority as a community member and as an elected official is to listen and to amplify the voices of people who should be centered in the conversations we're having about what Durham should look like and how Durham should be structured. I also believe that, in my experience on the Participatory Budgeting Steering Committee, that city workers in particular are crucial in implementing any policies or programs that City Council would be passing. And so making sure that you all are involved in that process, making sure that you're not implementing something that you haven't actually felt like you had a chance to buy into is extremely important to me. And then one of the policies that I'm advocating for on my platform is a thriving wage as opposed to a living wage, just because we've been advocating for $15 an hour as a minimum wage for a long time. And at this point in Durham, $15 an hour is no longer livable. A housing wage in Durham is about $22 an hour. And so we're advocating for something that, while better than the current minimum wage of $7.25, is still not enough for us to be able to afford a 2-bedroom rental or house. And so advocating for a thriving wage of $25 an hour, which is not something we can pass across the entire city, but we can advocate for city employees, is something that I believe very strongly in, so that people can stop to sort of treading water and can really take care of all of their needs and be able to live their full lives as they should, and not just be seen as, functionaries, but seen as full people. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. And now we'll have AJ Williams with the same question.
Hey y'all, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm honored to be here tonight. Yeah, happy Striketober. First thing I want to say is, I come out of the organizing community in Durham, and I've been on the front lines with folks from Raise Up 15. I spoke at the Strike for Black Lives rally, as well as showed up with folks from UE150 at City Hall demanding livable wages for part-time city workers. And so as a city council member, knowing what happens on the other side, I'm going to prioritize city workers. City workers are the lifeblood to Durham. We have essential workers or essential services and workers who run waste collection, make sure our infrastructure maintenance is taken care of, from the water treatment plants. Often these services are taken for granted and overlooked. And I'm advocating in my platform for city-funded training initiative that would actually provide 0 and low-cost trade certificates to lower income residents. And in turn, the city can end up hiring those folks who complete that program. For a number of years, I understand that city workers have expressed a deep dissatisfaction in unfair working conditions with the grievance procedures, racist hiring practices, and promotional practices. And workers have described job cuts, unfair treatment, and arbitrary hiring and promotion while skipping over Black and brown qualified workers. And so as a city council member, I also stand for racial justice and equity in all of the policies that come out of the city and our municipal government. I understand that many of us in Durham right now, because of COVID-19, are struggling to make ends meet. And I think North Carolina, as Ms. Johnson mentioned, it is long overdue for a rise in our minimum wage to at least $15 an hour, but I actually think we can do better. And I think that comes from listening to essential workers like yourselves and organized labor formations who are really doing this work right now. I'm the child of a postal worker. My mother, who's been a postal worker with the APWU local here in Durham since 2001. She's a shop steward. And, you know, I came home watching her work on grievance procedures on her laptop at the kitchen table, trying to make sure that the folks had their needs taken care of. I'm proud to say that I've also been endorsed by the NC State AFL-CIO and the Durham Association of Educators, which is the teachers union. And I earned those endorsements because I believe in empowering workers at all costs. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your response. Next, we'll hear from Leonardo Williams with the same question.
Yeah, thank you all for having me here tonight. And I'll tell you what I'm most excited about this forum tonight, because most of the time throughout the race, you've heard me talk about just, you know, education, young Black boys, and, you know, small business. I talk about those things because those are the things that I'm practicing and actually practically doing right now. But I'm most excited about this because I really get to talk about my background and my advocacy and my union experience. And, you know, let me start by saying I'm now taking the steps of actually bringing into fruition, you know, how we can get our institutions to support the work that you all are doing. But let me be very clear. The work that you're doing now, I've been doing for a long time. When I was chair of the state's largest foundation for public school children in North Carolina, and I remember getting a call in the middle of the night, hey, Leo, they just cut the funding for public schools. They just stopped payroll deduction. You know, I was the one in the General Assembly the next morning, you know, fighting on behalf of educators. I was the one in the General Assembly, this 6'5" Black man, walking down the halls of the General Assembly, trying our best to unionize North Carolina. This is a very, very outdated policy that we're still being held under, you know. And as I said before, I need for us to look in the mirror and ask us, what will we do when we get what we want? You know, and that's why I pride myself. I pride myself in the tears that I cried and the hustle that I put forth to make sure that my family, my staff family, was taken care of during this pandemic. And I take pride in the fact that I made those tough phone calls and got my hands dirty to help raise $3 million to make sure that we kept jobs during this pandemic. I thank you all for the work that you've done, because a lot of what we're practically doing at my restaurant and my small business is because my staff had buy-in. My staff worked with me to advise on how we actually move forward. And I'm talking about that because the most important thing we must do is listen. So a lot of the work that UE150 is already doing and has been doing, look at the work that I'm doing and look at the work that my staff and my staff family has been doing with me. We actually putting it into practice. Now we got to work together to make sure that all these big corporate boys that are coming into town are doing the same thing. You know, so that's in the private sector. In the public sector, that's why I'm running for office, to bring that same practice right here to Durham. So I want to let you know that you have my commitment. That's what I can promise you. You have my honesty. You have my commitment to listening and making sure that continuing you be part of the actual solution. So thank you for having me here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for all the responses from the candidates for that question. We're going to move on to the second question. How do you plan to work with the City Workers Union to address concerns of city employees during your tenure in office? And we'll start again with Elaine O'Neill. How do you plan to work with the City Workers Union to address your concerns of city employees during your tenure in office?
Well, one of the things that as I mentioned before, is we have to find a way for us to have ongoing communications and be able to understand what your concerns are and how we should work together. So there has to be a process in place. As you know, I'm coming from the judiciary and from academia, so my world is a little different. But having run organizations, I do know that there's a culture that you walk into that you must be onboarded into and kind of feel your way around it. So that's why I'm inviting our conversations to start. I know that the city manager.
Excuse me. Can you be quiet, please?
I'm
Can
sorry.
you stop talking, please?
I don't know who.
So
Sorry about that.
I know that the city manager runs the day-to-day operations, and there's an onboarding process by which they tell me how those long lines are drawn, and where. Okay.
I don't know who's
So,
unmuted.
What
I
I'm
apologize
hoping
for
to
that.
do.
I removed that person. I'm sorry, Elaine.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so I am hoping to, like I said, institute what I'm calling, and it might not be the name of it, of councils, where we are committed to talking with workers and finding out what you need and how we best go about it. So I'm asking to be taught, you know, how we are going to interact together. And I need your ideas in making it happen. You know, I can have all.
Oh, shut the fuck up! You talk too much! Goddamn boy! Goddamn boy! I'm a fucking, oh my fucking god! Oh, shut the fuck up! 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 You stupid bitch!
That is Greg. That the name that is showing is Greg. It's coming up under a Greg. So he would need to be removed.
Wow, y'all.
Okay, I'm gonna follow that person's advice and shut up for a minute.
No, Miss O'Neill, you don't need to do that.
How is that even happening?
I just removed.
That's a troll.
There's lots of
Okay.
trolls. I just had to remove like 5 people. I am very sorry, Miss O'Neill. Yeah.
Anton,
sorry
can
for
you
that.
mute?
And
Can you make it so that everyone is muted except the people that is speaking? So like,
yeah, I had been muting all those people, but they are unmuting themselves. Yeah, I'll see what I can do.
Okay. Sometimes we get the trolls, y'all. I mean, we're saying some powerful stuff.
The devil stay at work, but he ain't stopping nothing here today.
Amen.
No, I mean, if Miss O'Neill needs to finish her comments because she was interrupted several times.
Yeah, we
not gonna
can.
take a whole
We're
lot of
actually
time.
ahead of schedule, so we have time.
Well, so basically what I'm saying is, you know, there's a learning curve for me, and I'm gonna need your help to do the learning curve so that I can know what it is I need to know from your vantage point, and I need to be able to center your voices so that we can plan together on how we resolve the issues that you face with day to day. As I indicated earlier, without the essential workers and the city workers, during COVID, it will be a whole nother game changer. You all kept us going. And so I am committed to making sure that your voice is heard. Now, I'm not gonna make a whole lot of promises about what I can and cannot do because you're gonna have to help me do it. You know, so this is gonna be a team effort. And that's what I'm bringing to the table. I've run on a platform, a unifying, I'm gonna stick with that platform. And I am definitely one, if you look at the Racial Equity Task Force, one of our key phrases is the people who are closest to the pain have to be closest to the power. And so that's why I want you right there, helping to lead.
Next, we're here from Marian Johnson. Same question. How do you plan to work with the City Workers Union to address concerns of city employees during your tenure in office?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think I would want to work with you all the way that you feel would be most helpful. I know that in my experience on the leading negotiations at my former job, that we had to stay in regular communication, the negotiation team and the management team, just to ensure that we were actually making progress towards our goals. Since we were negotiating for a fair and transparent salary structure and for raising the salary floor, this is something that understandably management wanted to be slow to move on. So sort of keeping that pressure on and making sure that we were talking with them regularly, making sure that our demands were clear and making sure that, our non-negotiables were clear as well, and just making sure we were keeping them accountable to the timetable that we had put together. These are all things that I think that we should do, that the
Please
City
just
Workers
shut up.
Union and Thank you. The City Workers Union, I think, would be right to want regular meetings
Shut
with
up.
city council members. And
Yeah, you heard me. Shut up.
so yeah, that's really all I wanted to say, that the regular communication and making sure that we are keeping your needs and your concerns front and center so that we can address them, that would be what I would be able to commit to do.
We apologize for the trolls. We'll hear from Deidreana Freeman next.
Thank you for the question. And I can completely understand the security issues in a Zoom bombing situation. I've been on the other side of this. And so I just want to make sure I say, Dante, you're doing a good job. Just keep doing what you're doing and keep moving them out so we can continue the conversation. I will say that I'm very solutions focused. And so as I have worked, I would love to get more feedback. I'm so open to feedback that I often reach out by email, text, call, even in passing by, stopping through. And I think I might over communicate in some instances. And I lean on the folks that are within the UE150 to kind of communicate whether or not that's too much or too little. I would also note that there's a lot of sensitive issues that come up, and there's lots of layers that are always involved. And I want to be really clear that we have a new city manager, and noting going forward, if there's a new council in place, I think that you'll see a lot of differences. And so I look forward to what's next. And whether I'm on or off council, I would work with the UE150 to make sure that the issues that are raised are addressed. I know specifically the issues that were raised at the graveyard. I think that there's been some movement. I know it's a process, it takes time, but I do try to keep an eye on it. And I know there's a lot of staff changes, noting often that these are issues around personnel. You don't always get, I can't always share the feedback. And so just know that this is not just about it's not about politics for me. It's heart's work. And so knowing that these are folks that I have known in this community for a long time, I think it's important to make sure that they're respected and that they're treated with dignity. There's been a lot of incidents, and I could get real graphic about some of the details, but it's often that there's a disconnect with the way in which our council operates and how, I guess, our city staff union should be supported, which is different from workers in our community. And I want to be really clear. I heard Jamila, I want to say, when she said, we listened and then we went home. I want to say that it's harder to do the work outside of the city than it is inside. It's really like about what we, as a council come up with internally, but externally, it's really what our state and our federal government puts in place. And so until I know right now, currently they're working to raise the wage to $13 an hour. We can put as much pressure around that to at least get that part moving, but it takes our advocacy together, and I'm committed to doing that work. Thank you.
Thank you, Deidreana. Now we'll hear from Leonardo Williams.
Hey, sorry about all that disrespectfulness. One thing I can say is we're all on the same team, and we're trying to take care of Durham here. So let's just hang in there. The best thing I can do without just getting all technical and wonky is to tell you what I have been doing. Many of us are dealing with labor issues right now where it's just, we are short staffed. But I can, fortunately say we aren't hurting too bad, at my place of work, because when someone does come in and say they're looking for a job, my whole staff sit down and they interview them. And, I listen to my team, and everybody that works with me gets paid well, and, they're getting healthcare and we're working on retirement. I'm talking about that because that's what I'm practically doing. You know, I listened. And now, you know, I'm running for office to do the same thing. You know, we got through this pandemic. We're getting through this pandemic because of the folks on this call and the folks throughout the city who are part of the union or not. You know, Durham came together, we were strong. You know, so I believe the first thing, as I said earlier, is to listen. But I will let you know the first way you can offend me is if you don't hold me accountable. You know, you got to hold me accountable, which means I got to be accessible to you and we got to work together. That's the only way I know how to do it. You know, I bring my professional expertise, I bring my personal lived experiences, but we are all solution founders together. You know, so it's real simple for me. I want to make sure that we can expand the tax base in Durham. We do that by bringing more opportunities to work, more jobs, and jobs that actually pay well, so folks can actually live a decent quality of life. It is that simple. You know, and I have the expertise to do that. Thank you.
Sorry, I'll turn everyone's audio off, and now I'm trying to let some people have the permissions. Keisha, you should hopefully be able to unmute now. That means it's working. Keisha, there should be a request to unmute appearing on your screen. You might have to click that in the middle of your screen. For now, we can go to AJ for the while we wait on Keisha.
Okay. All right. Yeah, thank you for that question. The first thing I'm gonna say is I feel really welcome in this space because I see a lot of people that I know. Dante, Clara, Keith. I'm not actually separate from the folks in the Zoom call right now. I'm one of y'all. And so and what I do know is we're already connected, right? So I'm not hard to find. I'm gonna always be accessible as a council person. I think the thing that we should learn from the ways that unions operate is that the processes that happen inside of unions are reflective of how democracy should actually be, which is people-centered in terms of co-governance, in terms of decision-making, in terms of having open meetings and elections. That is actually how government is supposed to run. And so we have a lot to learn from unions. And so what I'm saying, I say all that to say, see Mama Cookie on here too. I'm not hiding and I'm accessible. If anybody wants my phone number, you know how to get in touch with me. And I'll still be out here. Thank you.
It looked like Keisha froze. Oh, no, there she is.
I don't know if you guys can hear me because I can't
Hear you now.
you for
Yeah.
some reason.
We can hear you now.
I can't hear you, but I'm gonna go ahead with the question to keep the flow of the meeting going. Thank you. I think it's AJ was the last person speaking. I can't hear you, but I will keep things going. Third question, do you support a $25 minimum wage for all essential workers? If so, what is your plan to implement it for city workers? What about others that don't directly work for the city? Given your limited powers with state interference with preemption laws. And we'll go with AJ Williams as the first response.
Thanks, y'all. So yeah, I definitely support living wages of $15 an hour for city workers, but also workers employed by companies who have city contracts. One of the things I often bring up is my work with Durham Beyond Policing. I'll say it again here because UE150 is actually a coalition partner of ours, and we actually went to City Hall and were able to win $15 an hour for part-time city workers because we joined forces with UE150. And so in terms of preemption, I actually support the Senate Bill 673 and House Bill 612, which actually would raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. It's something I think North Carolina is long overdue on. We can actually set a higher minimum wage that's higher than the federal standard. And I think that North Carolina generally in terms of preemptive laws is way behind, like Jim Crow era behind. And is really prohibitive to local municipalities from being able to provide worker protections. So I want to make sure we're in touch with our local delegates on that tip as well. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I can hear you guys now. Now we'll have Leonardo Williams with the same question. And the question is in the chat if you need to.
Okay, so it's $25, not $15.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's very, I think one of the candidates kind of mentioned that $25. We want to see how you felt about it.
Okay, sorry. Okay, yeah, I support I support whatever wage will allow us all to have a decent quality of life. If that is $25 an hour minimum wage, then yes, if we can legally and be able to economically make that happen. I want to be really careful not to overpromise what I have limitations to deliver on. But what I can say is the minimum wage in North Carolina is $7.25, which is horribly abusive and oppressive. And now they're talking about $13 an hour. And I think that that is also horrible and oppressive. But if we continue to wait on the government, you know, to get us, help us get access to economic mobility, then we're going to be waiting for a long time. So what I've done is organize with small business owners across the city to, you know, work together to have a collective package for healthcare so that we can offer a decent package for healthcare to our staff. What I've also done is offered working on retirements. You know, my healthcare is offered by Tanisha Bolden, Dorian Bolden's wife, who owns BU Cafe, you know, and working with M&F Bank to offer a retirement package. We have to take care of us right here locally. But I also don't want to say, you know, hey, Leo, can you, you know, I'm not going to say I can pay $25 an hour because then in about 3 months, we're not even going to have a business. We're going to run out. So until we can economically create the capacity for us to do it privately, then I can do it, you know, and the same thing applies for the city. We have to expand the tax base in order to make sure we can pay that. I would never tell somebody, yes, I want to make sure everybody can be paid $25 an hour and have not created the economic capacity to make that happen. You know, so if whatever necessary steps need to be taken, which I do know as an actual small business owner, we are going to have to expand the tax base. We're all going to have to create more jobs. We are going to have to make the market much more aggressive. We are going to have to find a way to deal with supply chains disruption because money doesn't grow trees. So I'm not going to overpromise, but yes, I do support that when we can make it happen, and I'm willing to commit to taking the steps to make that happen.
Thank you for your response. Now we'll hear from Deidreana Freeman, same question.
Thank you for the question. I think that it's, as an aspirational goal, it's a phenomenal number, but I think it's going to continue to move. Acknowledging that it was a few years ago when we were doing the Fight for 15 conversation that people were saying that that wasn't going to be enough based on the fact that you would lose SNAP benefits or you would lose housing benefits. And so just noting, like, I don't think it's a set number. I think it has to be specifically tied to how you would actually economically thrive in our community. And so we could say today it's 25 and tomorrow it's 30. I think it needs to be tied to our housing costs. And there are a number of ways to do it. And I think incrementally, we as a city have been doing that. And so just making sure that we're aligning ourselves to make sure that it's tied to inflation, it's tied to the cost of living in a way that's kind of systems oriented. So it's not directly tied to a number, it's tied to the cost, is the main way I would say that I would work to do that. And we are currently working to do that. I know that you know, folks will share a lot of, you know, ideas, and they're great ideas, but it's really about how we can actually implement them that I try to focus. And so I want to be very solutions focused and practical about these solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Deidre. Now we're here from Marian with the same question.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I am the candidate who raised the $25 an hour as a minimum wage. And so, yeah, I do support it. And I also know, since I've studied and written about minimum wage, both at the North Carolina Justice Center when I was on the Budget and Tax team, and at Think NC First, and then before when I was at the National Partnership for Women and Families, advocating for work-family policies and equal pay, I know that we can't raise the minimum wage overnight, especially when it's going to be a significant shift from what it is currently. And so having it be, as Councilmember Freeman said, incremental, so that we make sure that the budgeting can actually catch up to what we're talking about is extremely important. And so that would be what the city could do for city employees and for contractors. In terms of beyond city employees, as somebody mentioned in the chat, we do have state preemption laws that prevent us from being able to raise the minimum wage for the entire city. So what we can do is advocate. And that is something that has happened before with the Durham Livable Wage Project, where we got businesses to sign on to and to agree to pay $15 an hour as the minimum wage, or as the living wage is what they're calling it. And so that sort of advocacy is what's needed, because sometimes city council can't actually legislate themselves, but they can advocate. They can advocate at the state level. They can have a specific position that they stand for. And that is what I would call on us to do. And yeah, that's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Marian. And we'll have the final response to that question from Elaine.
Thank you for that question. This is one of those deep-seated issues that we really got to dig deep in, because we want everybody to thrive and not just survive. So as others have said, whether it's $25 or $40, we've got as a community to commit that everybody lives well in Durham. So how do you do that for a city that's 300,000 and you have city workers and essential workers making up a large part of that city populace? Well, I'll point you to the Racial Equity Task Force as a starting point, which is a living document that I was a part of, commissioned by the city as a part of an 18-member task force to look at these deep city issues and how the city can influence those things, change those things with policy changes and digging down systemically, and also with its constituents, meaning your county, your public school systems, and all of your systems that are involved in these deep city issues. So I invite you to take a look at that, because what you're really talking about is wealth building, particularly for people of color and Black people, where we've not had an opportunity to build wealth. And so now we need to make up those gaps. And in that, you will find recommendations that deal specifically with wealth building. The next approach is that as a trained lawyer, all of this stuff is we're dealing with laws, whether you're dealing with preemptive laws by the state or whether you're dealing with county and local ordinances. So it would be my job as your mayor, and who happens to be a lawyer, to take those skills that I've gained in the judiciary and apply them directly to what I'm faced with. So how do we look at all of these bodies of laws and figure out what laws we need to address and possibly change or challenge, or what laws we need to enhance? So that's what I will be doing. So it's a multifaceted approach, because we know that middle class and people and low income folks, we've been left out for many, many years. So it's gonna take us some time to get there, but I believe that we can. These are not unsolvable problems, but it's gonna take us the time to effort to really dig down deep. And so First, please look at that racial equity task force that provides us a guidance on how you build a toolkit to begin to address these issues. The second I say is we have to really look at the laws and see where we're going to have to try to help fine tune those things. And that is what I will bring to the table in order to make sure that we thrive, not just survive. We will leave no one behind.
Thank you. Thank you for your responses. Now we'll go on to the fourth question. There have been a lot of efforts by City Council to make housing affordable in Durham, yet it remains a major challenge. What are your concrete plans to make housing affordable for everyone? And we'll start with AJ.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the things I always point to, last year in March, the average cost of a one-bedroom apartment in Durham was $995. And by August, it had risen to $1,399. We have renters that are being pushed out of the city. For me, our essential workers, because folks are working at for such grim wages, the thought of any of our essential workers being able to actually live in the city is something that comes up as a priority for me. And so one of the things I've really been stressing as part of my platform is to have a developer accountability and oversight committee. I think we see the ways that development has entered our city aggressively. Even the thought of home ownership feels really out of the question for most of us. And so that's something that I want to create and have it led by housing advocates who have been doing this work in neighborhood associations and through organizing to really set the criteria for what it means to invest in Durham. I also think that we have the opportunity with some of our rezoning, which we can actually put aside a few units with every new development to include affordable housing. And I know there's some state preemptive laws with that too. Inclusionary zoning is banned in North Carolina, but I think that does not mean that we don't get to sit at the negotiation table and figure something out. I think we can get creative. And so generally, I think there's some opportunities. There are programs on the county level that I think could be transferred back to the city, like ERAP, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. There's several $1 million tied up in that program that aren't being released to tenants because of distrust. Typically, folks who work for the city and county might not trust Black and brown folks who are lower income. And so we need to change that. Those are some of the things I'm thinking about. Thank you.
Thank you, AJ. And next we'll hear from Leonardo with the same question.
Yeah, so I do get a little, this whole housing situation is really frustrating, simply because we talk about, affordable housing, but in reality, before we even get to affordable housing, we have to talk about accessible housing, and being able to afford, affordable housing. Well, for me, it's about affordable living, so I want to take a holistic approach. The first thing we can do right now, and I'm actually doing this, is making sure that people are getting paid a decent wage. We have to lead by example, not only in the private sector, but we have to lead by example in the city as well. And let me just be really clear: the stronger you all are, the stronger we all are. If you make it a decent wage, the whole city is actually starting to be vibrant financially. But what's happening is because Durham and Dante, I saw your message about someone's house at 183 being sold almost 300,000 more. That is a reality. People from the Bay Area, California, they are loving this place and they're moving over here and they're saying, oh my gosh, housing is so cheap in Durham, when it's just pushing many people out. Here's what's happening now. Housing and the affordability of it is expanding the poverty line now. So you can make $80,000, and that's well beyond majority of the people in Durham. And it's like a house could be worth $500,000, and this is arbitrary. I can't afford a $500,000 home right now. $500,000, the bank appraised it at $450,000. You put a $550,000 up. Now you got to come up with $100,000 plus 20% closure. That is the reality of what's happening in Durham, and that's beyond many people in Durham. So my point is, the one thing that we can do right now is to make sure people are getting paid a decent wage. We can do as much as we can in the private sector, and we can do what we can in the actual public sector as well. The second thing is council holds the power of zoning. And if you take GlaxoSmithKline, for example, Glaxo just reduced their office demand, their office space from 100% capacity to 10%. So that entire campus, I see that campus as being rezoned as an actual community. You know, we have the power of zoning. That's what we can do. So when you think about all of this office space that is currently used, the pandemic taught us we don't necessarily need it. So I hope that, you know, I'll be on council to be able to make that decision and say, all right, we want to rezone that and actually increase the stock. So we increase supply, we can meet demand. And that's how we can actually bring the price down. And we can get really creative, such as deed restrictions and other methods that we can incorporate to make sure that folks aren't priced out. From college students that are having to come out of college come off campus and have to be in the same market, to folks that are just everyday like us that are actually trying to just find a roof over our heads. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonardo. Next, we'll hear from Deidreana with that same question.
Thank you. That's a great question. I think a lot of the conversation sits at affordable, and similar to how Leonardo Williams mentioned accessible, I've been saying sustainable. And so just acknowledging that in order for housing to be sustainable, we have to account for our climate change, we have to account for our energy use, we have to account for the environmental injustice of lead hazards in the home, so air quality, all of those things are all unaffordable. And so I think my focus has been on healthy housing and just trying to make sure that folks can be healthy in their homes over the last couple of years. And I will say that it began long ago when I actually inspected over hundreds of homes in this city with the Healthy Homes Initiative under President Obama. And I will say it's continued till now. I brought forward the Tenants Bill of Rights, acknowledging that there's an opportunity for us to push in at the municipal level towards actual action at the federal level, in the same way that I'm working on the transformational wealth building strategies that we come up with that push in on reparations at the national level. Because I think a lot of the concerns that we're facing in Durham are tied to our federal government, and we've got to make sure that we're lobbying our legislators effectively so that the actual laws are changed. Right now, fair housing would block the city from actually implementing a plan that said that we wanted to make sure that Black homeowners were addressed because of redlining. We can't even do that right now. And so I've been working very steady and incrementally at the state and the national level with the National League of Cities and the North Carolina League to do that work. I also work in the faith community to try to make sure that my faith leaders are leading in that space. And so my Bishop Sam at the state level and Bishop Bishop Curry at the national level or international level have both been very, very vocal about how we make sure that our housing is secure. And so just noting that it's not in one space that I work in many spaces to organize. And it's about how the relationships are tied or are built and how they're used to actually benefit the city of Durham. And I would say that I would also note that there is a limitation around housing supply and the materials that are used. Right now, we focus more on stick-built and steel. We don't have a conversation about concrete or concrete alternatives for building houses or 3D printing because our housing code is limited. And that is something we can change here municipally with 4 or 7 votes, and then also pushing at the state level to make it improve our minimum housing code. So there's a lot that could happen. I could say that it's been unfortunate that we haven't gotten to it, but I'm still working to do those things over the next 2 months. And then hopefully, if reelected, I'll continue to do it for 4 more years. Thank you.
Thank you, Deidreana. Next, we'll hear from Marian.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that question. I'm really excited about the fact that we're finally implementing the affordable housing bond at the city level. So that is both creating more affordable housing and also connecting people to more affordable housing. I know that the rental assistance program has been really difficult for a lot of people to navigate and actually get the assistance that they need. And so making sure that the rental assistance program is, or any rental assistance that we have going forward, is fully staffed, fully funded, and fully communicated so that people can actually access it and navigate it so they can get the help that they need. I also believe Leonardo made a good point about zoning being a really important tool at the city's disposal. Being able to rezone parcels of land that the city owns to medium high or high density housing so that we can just create more affordable housing. And also recognize that we need a diversity of affordable housing, that too often when people think affordable housing, they're thinking like studios or one bedrooms, but we have a variety of family structures and a variety of different people who need affordable housing. So just having studios and one bedroom apartments is not adequate at all. I think that the Willard Street apartments is an incredible example of what the city can do when it comes to creating affordable housing, that those apartments are transit accessible, they are beautiful, they are environmentally conscious. There's a lot of green space. They're very well designed. And that is something I think that stands as a really great example of what we can do when we're committed to rethinking affordable housing and making sure that people are connected to the best housing that they can possibly afford. I'm also very excited about small area plans as a tool to protect affordable housing. It's something that we don't have in Durham, but I know it has worked in Chapel Hill and I believe in Greensboro as well, giving community members more of a say on what sort of development should happen in their neighborhood, so they can have a list of requirements saying, if you want to develop in our neighborhood, you need to have this amount of affordable housing, you need to have this amount of green space, we want this sort of retail. And so city council can enforce those small area plans so that if, like happened in Walltown, if a developer comes in and says, this is what we want to buy this land, the community can actually say, if you don't follow these requirements, then you can't actually purchase this and you can't develop here. So I think that that would be great leverage, and making sure that we design small area plans so that we give priority to legacy Black neighborhoods that are most vulnerable to gentrification and displacement, so that we don't sort of fall victim to the not in my backyardism that tends to prevent us from being able to create affordable housing across the city. So those are three things that I'm really excited about at the city level.
Thank you, Marian. And lastly, we'll hear from Elaine on the same question.
Well, y'all probably know by now that I grew up on the West End community, and my father, who was a Liggett & Myers worker and had, he graduated from high school around the same time I did. He was 45 when I was born, right? So he went back to get his GED from Durham Tech, but he was able to take his salary at Liggett & Myers was $7 an hour. And my mother kind of really started working after I was born, and I'm the youngest of 5. But he was able to take that money at Liggett & Myers, and he was able to purchase a home that we still own. My parents have gone on the West End for $40,000 back in the day. That house is now worth over $200,000. So we're looking at it and we're living it. You know, how has it gone for that much? And because all of my brothers and sisters, we're 9-to-5 workers, so that's a fixed income, and it takes all 5 of us to keep my sister in that house who's legally blind, right? To keep her there. So it's real when they're talking about you're watching these houses that's going up for $300,000 and $400,000 right in your back door, because like we have a little bit of land about 5 years ago, we weren't even able to build on that land. But now all of a sudden, you can put some stuff back there. Somebody changed the laws to allow a lot of this stuff to happen. And so that's the accountability piece that you have to talk about. So when I started on this race, housing has always been a big issue. So I had to put myself through housing school, and I'm still going through it just so that I can get my hands around sort of what's going on in that world. But we had done a lot of that work. Once again, in that racial equity task force, you'll see there's a chapter that deals specifically with housing issues and recommendations around it. And you're still talking about wealth building. But in my going to school, y'all, the thing that surprised me the most, when I started asking people, okay, so are the developers, have they really sat down at the table to talk with people who need affordable housing? Crickets. You mean to tell me nobody's having the conversations with the people who can make it happen? Having the conversations with the people who need to have it happen? What? That to me was just like a glaring hole. So that's the first thing is you got to put the people to the table, because like what somebody said, this is not a one size fits all thing. The other thing is that we have to recognize that there are collateral consequences when folk are involved in the system that I was in, the criminal justice system, when they pick up felons. There's a whole lot of people out there that are homeless because they have that tag, irregardless of how you think about maybe how they have gotten it. But the fact of the matter is, you disappear off the housing grid when you're a convicted felon. You can't get public housing, and you can't even apply for an apartment real good, right? So we have to be able to own that piece and be able to help people stabilize their lives. So it's a multifaceted approach that we're gonna have to do, but we have to center those voices of those people who are in need of housing, and we have to sit them at the table with the people who can make it happen and put our bang and butt behind that. I'm a lawyer, I'm trained as a lawyer, so I know how to read laws. And I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do a lot of that, because I'm not gonna take the stance that we're gonna put everything on the state. All laws are subject to be changed, but what we do have to do is make sure you put the right people in the seats over in Raleigh, in Durham, and everywhere you have the power to vote. When I start to tell y'all, okay, I've looked at these laws, you're gonna have to vote to change some of these folk out and put some people in who will change them. It's gonna have to happen. So it's a multifaceted approach. But once again, this is not rocket science. You cannot tell me that in Durham, North Carolina, with all this what we watching go on, that everybody can't live decently. For real? No, we can do that. We're gonna do it, if y'all help me.
Thank you so much, Elaine. And thanks for all the candidates for the questions that preceded this part of the meeting. At this point, we're going to open up the discussion for one question from the floor and one from the audience. Question: what will you do to address chronic issues with issues of wage theft, unsafe working conditions that workers are experiencing in Durham? And what will you do about problem employers who violate workers' rights? And we'll start that off with Deidreana Freeman.
Thank you for the question, and I apologize. I was trying to log into my other meeting at the same time. But you asked about typical labor costs. I missed that question.
I'm gonna put it in the chat.
But I heard wage theft, and I think that the conversation occurred at the workers' rights level and the report that came forward. And I know that the conversation didn't go further, but there definitely should be reaching out to the Secretary of Labor to make sure that those reports are made. If they're not being followed up on, I can definitely track back and do that. But as I understood it, the Workers' Right Commission or committee was focusing on that. And if that's not happening, I'd love to hear that.
Okay, great. And we'll have that same question from Elaine O'Neill.
Okay, now this is where I'm telling y'all where I need education, because wage theft, that's a new term for me. So you have to explain some of these. That's why I say you got to talk to me and explain to me your world, because my world has been very isolated. I've done a lot of things, but I don't know everything. So you'll have to explain some of that. Unsafe working conditions, of course, I know I can understand that, but some terminology you'll have to explain to me and help me to understand what we're talking about. Now, one of the things that I do know, when I started running, I got a call from a young lady that was working at Blue Cross Blue Shield who's having some issues in trying to navigate the city system. And she said, do you think that the city has an escalation management department? And once again, I'm like, well, what's that? She said, well, it's a way where you basically have a place where if folk are not able to get issues resolved, there is a department that comes in and they go through the checks and balances that would need to be done to make sure that everything is working cleanly for folk to navigate. right? So you have an issue, you're able to call them. If you're not able to get resolution, there's another department that will walk it back through, and they deal with it from the consumer part and they deal with it from the government part. That's the kind of thing that we have to have in these instances to make sure that those voices that are being subjected to these things have a way to make sure that their issues are being heard. There has to be some type of entity in my mind, and this is just my thinking now, like I said, as I'm learning this new world, in my mind, there has to be a way to have checks and balances when people have problems with problem employees. There needs to be a way that we are able to check that those concerns are being documented and addressed. I don't think that should be hard to be able to do. We just have to make sure that it is done properly from the perspective of the person who are having these issues, that you do not put people in danger of losing their jobs and not being able to speak up. Now that should be in a neutral place, sort of like a Crime Stoppers in my mind, where you're able to call anonymously and somebody checks and makes sure, and then they get back to you with you not ever having to reveal, you know, who you are to the extent that the employer could get back to that. That's how I'm thinking. You all have to let me know if I'm even in the ballpark, because like I said, some of these things I'm coming from a different perspective, and I'm going to need your help in learning how to navigate the system and being able to push the buttons that you think I need to push. But that's how I'm kind of thinking about that there has to be a way for people to safely report, and we track how that reporting is done and make sure that there's an end result, that it's just not me calling and saying, okay, this happened and then nothing happens. Like you all said, nothing happens. Where there has to be, yeah, we have to make sure that people are accountable. That's the point of government, in my mind.
Okay, thank you for that response, Elaine. And now we'll hear that same question, have Marian respond to that same question. It's in the chat if you need to look at it.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I believe that wage theft and unsafe working conditions, all the things raised in that question are the reason that we see so many workers striking right now, that we see Kellogg's workers striking, we see John Deere workers striking. I think that one thing the city council can do, just because, again, this is not necessarily something that's within our purview, is just to stand in solidarity with workers and help connect them to the attorney general and to the labor secretary, so they can actually escalate their grievance to someone who can take it seriously, who can actually do something about it, making sure that the laws are enforced, that people aren't having their wages stolen, that people aren't, forced to work in unsafe conditions that are illegal, making sure that we have a pro-labor administration at the state level is extremely important as well. And so those would really be the things that we could do at the city level. But again, it's not something that's really under city council's purview.
Thank you, Marian. And now we'll hear from AJ with the same question.
Yeah, thank you for this question. I think when it comes to the private sector, it feels more difficult. And as Ms. Johnson just relayed, we are seeing a massive strikes happening all over the country with private corporations. But one of the things I'm really excited to push for and be publicly in support of is particularly for public workers, public sector workers, is the right to collective bargaining. Again, it's one of those Jim Crow era preemptive laws that really doesn't protect workers in any way. And I know that last year our city council approved the Workers' Bill of Rights, and that came out of the Durham Workers' Rights Commission. And it had some really crucial worker protections named in it, such as democratic wage and the right to organize without retaliation. And I think as we are still moving through this pandemic, it's going to be imperative that our workers have basic protections. So I want to make sure there's hazard pay for essential workers, and that we have HEPA filtration centers and silly facilities, that we have COVID-19 testing where available, the provision of PPE and temperature checks at all shifts. I think those are some of the things we can work in on the municipal level. But again, I think it's going to be more difficult to hold corporations accountable, but we can always strike. There's that. So thanks, y'all.
Okay, and our final response for the night is going to be Leonardo with the final question.
Thank you for this. I experienced this firsthand myself for a long time. As I started, I'm a 2-time teacher of the year, but that's 2 times. I taught for years. And in 2008, when the recession happened, they froze our pay. And inflation continued to rise, and our pay stayed the same and stayed the same. That's another form of wage theft. And I've heard this over and over and over in Durham as well. But I'll tell you what happened, and being a member of NCAE, we had to find ways to make our voice heard. I'm one of the original 5 members of Organized 2020. That's a caucus within the NCAE where we had to get our organization some bite because it just wasn't happening. So let me just, and Judge Elaine, you can give me a thumbs up, but will you allow us, if we're fortunate to be on council, be accessible to the public? Thank you. So there it is. I will always be accessible. And I think that, relationships are everything. Yes, we have a city infrastructure in place, but I'm not running for office to be disconnected from the people. So I think the best way, is to make sure we have trustworthy relationships where that listening can be pure. I think that there needs to be formal communications where this can be noted and actually have something done about it so it can be accounted for. And I will be held accountable as well. So I believe you put in the work, you need to be paid for it. And that includes making sure that you're working in a safe and actual conducive condition. So I can't give you an idea of it because I'm practicing it every day. I'm giving you what I actually do. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can ask the folks that work alongside me. So yeah, I plan to bring that as an example to our city council. Thank you for the question.
We want to thank everyone for participating with us tonight in this forum. And remember, it's because of the work that we do that allows the city of Durham to run. We are all essential workers. Next, we're going to hear from Mama Cookie on the Fight for 15, I think, Dante.
Well, my question was already asked. As you know, I'm Mama Cookie, and I was born and raised right here in this city called Durham, North Carolina, on the West End, around the corner from you, Miss O'Neill. Grew up, played around there, met your parents, great people. But what I'm concerned about is we have an organization called Fed Up, and they're giving us a hard time, and I do it right here in my city. I don't do it in just one neighborhood. I do it right over here on the West End on Lakewood. But I want to know, when can I get some of you all to come out and be a part of it? Ms. Freeman, you showed up. But I would like to see some of the city workers come out and housing in Durham. I understand you were talking about the Willow Street housing. That's just a few apartments. The city of Durham is shut down far as the original residents living here. I live right here on Cornell, and I got $500,000 houses right behind me. I got homeless people that's from here, this West End, and sleeping in the church over here in the parking lot, making tents out here. What can we do about that? What can you all keep promises? I'm tired of the promises. I want to start seeing action. In 2019, I set a forum right down here at Lyon Park School. And all these promises, the same thing I'm asking today was made. And now, the same thing, nothing happened. I didn't even see any more of y'all. No one from that city council showed up to do anything. People in the workplaces are being harassed. Nobody's doing nothing. None of y'all never be out on that strike line when we're out there. We're striking because these people need a better. I've been abused on the job for 21 years. I worked at a job and I retired. But what are y'all going to do for us as a people? Will what make y'all happen? And I just want to know, what will y'all do? Don't make us promises that y'all are not going to keep. Stop making assumptions that you think you can make a change just to make yourselves look good. Because all of you are great people, and I respect each and every one of you. but we need change in this city called Durham, North Carolina.
Thank you, Mama Cookie.
I'm sorry,
I want
I
to
didn't
thank.
mean to get like that. I just got a
You're
little bit
fine.
emotional. I
I
apologize,
You're
y'all.
good. We want to thank all the candidates. That's going to conclude the question and answer session for tonight. I want to thank all the candidates who made the time to be here for this discussion. And we look forward to working with you in the future. If elected, we look to meeting with you soon. If not elected, we want to find ways to continue to collaborate and work to make Durham a better place to live and work for all of us. In solidarity, we thank you. We want to remind the City Workers Union members to please stay on the line so we can vote who we plan to endorse. Everyone else, have a great evening.
Thanks so much for having me. Y'all take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Good night.
Thank
Keep up the
you.
fight.
Have a good night.